High above the world, where clouds were soft as spun moonlight, and the sky stretched out like an endless sapphire blanket, lived a little dragon named Zephyr. His home was a magnificent crystal nest, nestled right at the very top of the highest floating island in the sky. It sparkled with all the colors of the dawn, catching the first sleepy rays of the sun and the last gentle whispers of the stars. Zephyr was a beautiful young dragon, with scales that shimmered like 1,000 tiny rainbows whenever the light caught them. But his most wonderful feature was his wings. They were delicate and grand all at once, stretching wide and catching the currents of the sky, painted with hues of rose, gold, and soft lavender. Oh, how Zephyr loved to fly! From the moment his mother taught him to spread his wings, he had spent his days soaring. He would leap from the crystal nest with a joyful chirp, his heart singing with the sheer delight of movement. He danced with the wind, twirled through fluffy white clouds that tickled his nose, and chased after sunbeams until they winked out of sight. When he was in the air, Zephyr felt truly free, powerful, and utterly magnificent. The wind was his friend, carrying him in grand adventures through the vast blue playground of the sky. Then, at the end of each glorious flight, came the part that made Zephyr's tummy do a little flutter. It was time to land. No matter how much he loved the sky, the ground always seemed to rush up to meet him too quickly. He would flap his wings frantically, trying to slow down, but it never quite worked. He would end up tumbling into the softest part of his crystal nest, usually with a sheepish squeak, or sometimes just gently bump into his mother's warm, comforting side. His mother, a grand and gentle dragon with wings like twilight, would nuzzle him with a knowing smile. "Almost, my little sky dancer," she'd murmur. "You'll find your footing soon enough." But Zephyr longed to land gracefully, to feel his forepaws touch down with a quiet dignity, just like his mother did. He dreamed of it, but the fear of that sudden rush of the ground was a tiny, wobbly pebble in his otherwise soaring heart. He was a master of the air, but a clumsy bumble on solid ground, and it was his secret worry. One evening, as the sky began to blush with shades of rose and violet, Zephyr was nestled beside his mother, listening to the soft rustle of her wings as she settled for the night. A gentle breeze drifted past, carrying with it a scent so delicate and sweet. Zephyr's nose twitched with curiosity. He looked out from their crystal nest, down into the soft, swirling clouds below. And there it was, on a tiny, solitary rock spire, barely large enough for him to stand on. A flower had unfurled its petals. It was a moon petal, rarer than a forgotten dream, and it only bloomed for one magical night. Its petals glowed with a soft, silvery light, like a tiny moon had fallen from the sky and nestled on the stone. The light pulsed gently, calling to him. Zephyr felt a deep, warm yearning in his heart. He had only ever heard tales of the moon petal, and now here was one, so close. He had to see it up close, to breathe in its sweet, ethereal scent. But to do that, he would have to fly down to the narrow spire and land all by himself. His mother was already drifting off to sleep, her breathing slow and peaceful. This was a challenge he would have to face alone. He took a deep, steadying breath and stretched his magnificent wings. He launched himself from the crystal nest, pushing off with a surge of courage. The twilight air was cool and soft against his scales, and he felt the familiar rush of joy as he soared. His wings beat with effortless grace, carrying him through the sky as if he were made of air himself. He circled once, then twice, admiring the silvery glow of the moon petal. It looked even more beautiful now, beckoning him closer. Zephyr tucked his wings just a little, beginning his descent. He glided down, 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 the rock spire growing larger beneath him. But as he got closer, the rock spire seemed to rush up at him, just as the ground always did. It looked so small, so unforgivingly hard. A shiver of panic fluttered in his chest, like a trapped butterfly. His heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Too fast, he thought, his breath catching in his throat. At the very last second, just as his paws were almost touching his dome, he pulled up sharply. His wings beat frantically, carrying him back into the safety of the open sky. He soared upwards, away from the tiny spire and the glowing flower, his heart thumping like a drum. He circled high above, panting a little, his scales prickling with the remembered fear. "I can do this," he whispered to himself, trying to sound brave. He gathered his courage once more and began another slow, careful descent. This time, he focused even harder, trying to slow himself down, trying to make his paws reach out. But the moment the spire loomed close, the fear returned. Again, he panicked, pulling up sharply, his powerful wings saving him from a clumsy landing. Floating high above the beautiful, glowing moon petal, Zephyr felt a wave of sadness wash over him. His wings drooped a little, and a soft sigh escaped his lips. "I'm a dragon of the sky," he thought, a tear pricking at the corner of his eye, "but I'm a coward on the ground. I'll never be able to land properly." The beautiful flowers seemed so far away, a prize he couldn't reach, even though he was flying right above it. As he hovered there in despair, his gaze drifted downwards, not at the flower, but a little to the side. A tiny, fluffy seed pod, no bigger than his smallest claw, detached itself from a dream willow tree that grew on a nearby floating isle. It didn't fall, it drifted. The evening breeze caught it gently, and the seed pod began to spin and spiral, slowly, gracefully. It floated downwards, using the wind to guide its descent, dancing softly in the air. Zephyr watched, mesmerized, as the little side pod settled. It touched down on the rock spire, right next to the moon petal, as softly as a whisper, so gentle it barely made a sound. It didn't rush, it didn't panic, it simply used the air. And then, Zephyr had an idea. He had been trying to land by diving, fighting against the speed, flapping his wings to slow himself down. But what if he didn't fight? What if he landed like the seed pod, by using the wind, by letting it carry him? He flew up high, even higher than before, until the moon petal was a tiny silvery speck below. He paused, took a deep breath, and then very slowly, he spread his beautiful wings wide, wider than he ever had, catching the gentle night air. Instead of flapping furiously, he let the wind support him, letting it cradle him as he began to drift downwards. He didn't focus on the ground rushing up. He focused on the feeling of the wind under his wings, the gentle currents that held him aloft. He let himself float, spiraling slowly, like a falling feather, like the dream willow seed pod. The world below grew steadily larger, but this time it didn't feel like it was rushing. It felt like he was gently descending, carried by an invisible hand. Closer and closer he came. He could see the intricate patterns on the moon petal's petals. He could almost smell its sweet perfume. He stretched out his front paws, not in a clumsy lunge, but gently, softly, guiding his descent with the tilt of his wings. Then his paws touched the cold stone of the spire, softly, quietly. Thump. He wobbled for a moment, just a tiny bit, but then he found his balance. He planted his forepaws firmly on the narrow spire, steady and strong. He did it. He had landed all by himself, with grace and calm. Zephyr sat proudly on the narrow spire, his heart filled with a quiet triumph. Right beside him, the moon petal glowed, its silvery light illuminating his scales. He lowered his head and took a long, deep breath, drawing in its magical, sweet scent. It was even more wonderful than he had imagined. He felt brave, capable, and wonderfully calm. The fear was gone, replaced by a warm glow of accomplishment. After admiring the flower for a peaceful moment, Zephyr spread his wings. He pushed off the spire confidently, launching himself into the air with a new kind of certainty. He circled once, then gently, just as he had practiced. He began to descend towards his own crystal nest. He used the wind, letting it guide him, until his paws touched the soft, fluffy interior of his home with a perfect, gentle landing. He snuggled down, his scales still tingling with the scent of the moon petal, and watched his mother sleeping peacefully nearby. He knew, with a certainty that warmed him from his nose to his tail, that he had conquered his fear all by himself. As the stars twinkled above and the soft clouds drifted by, Zephyr closed his eyes. He fell into a deep, contented sleep, dreaming of all the new and wonderful places he could now explore. For he knew in his brave little dragon heart that wherever he flew, he could now land safely, his paws touching the ground with grace and confidence.